Welcome back. Now that we're able to break these pots, things are looking pretty good, but we'd like to really have an actor that has one of these geometry collections. That way we can break it and perform any functionality that we like when something gets broken. So what we need is an actor that has one of these geometry collections as a component. So I'm going to go ahead and close my field system and my weapon blueprints. And I'm going to create a new actor class that we can use as the base class for breakable objects. So let's go into our C++ classes folder, into public, and we can make a new C++ class here. It's going to be a simple actor. I'm going to go to next, and we'll place this in the folder called breakable. And I'm going to call this actor Breakable Actor. And we'll go ahead and click Create Class. And once live coding finishes, we can head back into Visual Studio. We'll click Reload All, and here's our Breakable Actor class. Now, this is going to need a couple of things. For one, we need a geometry collection, and that's going to be a component. So what we can do is forward declare that type. It's going to be class uGeometry collection component. And we're going to add a geometry collection component to this actor. So let's go ahead and organize this a bit. I'm going to first remove these comments that are created for us by default and move that tick function up here into the top public section. And this bottom public section can actually be private. So we'll have a private section down here, and in the private section we'll add that geometry collection component. So that's going to be uGeometry collection component. And we'll call this geometry collection. And I'd like the details panel to be visible for this, so I'm going to make this a U property with visible anywhere. And we do need to construct this in our breakable actor constructor here. So once again, I'm going to remove some of these comments. I don't feel we need these at this point. So we'll get rid of that one and these ones, like so. And I don't think this breakable actor needs to tick. So I'm going to set this B can never tick to false, and we can construct our component. Now I'm going to Google uGeometry collection component and open up the documentation. And that way I can see what I need to include. That's in geometry collection component.h. So I'm going to go ahead and add that include first thing. Now that we have that type, we can use it to construct a geometry collection component. So we're going to say geometry collection equals create default subobject using uGeometry collection component. And we'll give this the native name, and we'll call this simply geometry collection. Now back in the documentation, if we look up at the inheritance hierarchy, we see that the geometry collection component is in fact derived from uScene component. So we could make this the root. So we're going to do that. I'm going to call setRoot component and set the root to geometry collection. And that way, that's the root component for our actor. Now the geometry collection is going to need to be configured. We want the collision presets set up properly. And we saw that we had to take this geometry collection in the world here and take its geometry collection component and do some things. For one, if we search for collision, we saw that we needed generate overlap events to be true. So we're going to want that from the get-go. So we're going to take geometry collection and search for generate overlap, and we have set generate overlap events. We're going to pass true in, so we have overlap events enabled by default. So let's see what happens here if we save all and kick off live coding. And looks like live coding fails, so what I'm going to do is close out of the editor. So when in doubt, we can always just compile straight from Visual Studio. I'll go ahead and Control F5 to do a proper compile. We did add a new class after all, so we want to make sure everything is compiled properly from here in our Visual Studio project. So we'll give it some time to compile that and launch the editor. So we're actually getting a compiler error here as well. Now it says unresolved external symbol, and it's looking at the uGeometry collection component. So what I'm going to do is take a look at the documentation again. And under references, we see module, and it says geometry collection engine. That's the module that contains this class. So to attempt to get this to compile correctly, I'm going to include that module manually in my build file. So I'm going to open up my /.build.cs, and in the public dependency module names, I'm going to see if I can simply include that module. It's called Geometry Collection Engine, and see if that gets rid of those compilation errors. So I'm going to Control-Shift-B just to compile from here in Visual Studio. And now I see that I get a successful compile. So if you get an error that looks like that, where it's having trouble recognizing the type that you're trying to use, check the module in the documentation and see if you need to include that module here in your build file. So now that that compiles successfully, I can simply double-click my .u project and bring that back up. So now that we've compiled, I'm going to go into my blueprints folder. And I'm going to make a new folder here called Breakables. And in Breakables, I'm going to make a new blueprint class and search for my Breakable Actor and choose that, and I'll call this BP_breakable. And I'm going to open that up, and here in Breakable Actor, we see that we have a geometry collection. And there's this gameplay event dispatcher, and in parentheses, chaos gameplay event dispatcher. So we kind of get that when we add a geometry collection component. Now, the geometry collection has a rest collection, and the dropdown shows us that we can choose our geometry collection. And as soon as we choose that, we see our pot here. Now, we do want to make sure that things are configured properly. If we scroll down to collision, we do see generate overlap events set to true. So we can try to break this thing. Let's get rid of our other geometry collection. In fact, I'm just going to move it out of the way and bring in one of these BP breakables. Let's see if we can just grab a weapon and break it. And sure enough, we can. So that's looking great. And the cool thing about this is that this is an actor. So we can choose what happens when we break this actor. Now, you may have noticed that the camera starts to glitch a bit when a piece flies in front of the camera, and that can easily be solved by setting the collision response to the camera channel to ignore. And that way, when pieces fly in front of the camera, they won't cause the camera to zoom in like that. And that's something we can set from the C++ site as well on our geometry collection. So we can take geometry collection and call set collision response to channel. We can choose E collision channel, camera, and for the response, we can choose E collision response, and we'll choose ignore. So we just set that in the blueprint, but now it's in our C++ class as well. So now that we have a breakable actor, what do we want to do when we actually break this thing? Well, we did create an interface, and that interface has a function we are calling. If we go back into our weapon.cpp file, we'll see that as soon as we get a box trace hit, down here in on-box overlap, we do our box trace, and if the other actor does implement the interface, we're calling getHit. That means we can react to it if the actor implements the interface, and we can easily implement the interface. We've seen how to do it from C++ in our enemy class in enemy.h. We're inheriting from iHitInterface. And we can easily do that in our breakable actor class. If we copy the include, interfaces/hitInterface, and we paste it here in breakableactor.h. And again, we have to place this above the generated.h. This has to be the last include. And we can simply inherit from the hit interface. So we can say public iHitInterface. And now, just like our enemy, we're inheriting from iHitInterface, and we can override that function. So back in enemy, we can see how we did it. All we did was we had virtual void get hit override. We can simply copy that. It's a public function, so we can paste that in the public section for Breakable Actor. And now this function has an override, and we can create a function definition for it here in Breakable Actor. And we can do anything we like in get hit. So we'll implement this next. For now, I think that's enough for us to have a Breakable Actor. We now no longer need this geometry collection. We can simply use our actor BP breakable, and we can have as many of these as we like. And the cool thing about these fields that we're adding is that they have a radius. So if I am close enough to another breakable actor, it should respond to that force field that we're creating. So I see that I've broken all of them. And those forces are a bit strong. We can always tweak that, but I leave that up to you as an exercise. Tweak those values and get those pots breaking just how you want them. Excellent. All right, so next we're going to implement some functionality when these pots break. For one, it'd be great if we made a smashing or breaking sound when we break these, so we'll get into that next. I'll see you soon.